Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for attending my talk. So I'm talking about passwords basically in an African context. So basically, the talk is going to be broken up into two little sections. I'm going to talk about how corporate South Africa uses passwords. And then I'm also going to talk about if we converted our passwords into an African language, for example, does it actually offer any additional benefits for passwords for the end user? So as I say, I'm Sibusiso Sishi, and these are all my details. And I'm from a South African-based company called Iron Sky. I'm a penetration tester. I'm also the co-owner of the company. And before I got into cybersecurity and pen testing, I was a professional athlete for 15 years, representing South Africa at various world events. So basically, in corporate South Africa, we also use English. English is the main language that's spoken in business because South Africa, we have many different languages, so we kind of all revolve to English to talking about things. And what I found was that many of the password policies that people were using within the organizations were based in English. So with English password examples and also with English, the systems that they're using, both South Africa is mostly a Microsoft shop, so most of the systems people are using were also based in English words. User awareness in South Africa is extremely low around cyber, and also there's just the cyber risks and passwords. Things are very, very low. What I found was that the default Windows password policy in South Africa was sort of like the go-to when creating passwords. So administrator will say, yes, this is our password policy, and after that, once that is set, cheers, we don't really care. As long as the passwords conform to the password policy, they never really looked at it after that. So, so basically, when I wanted to understand what kind of passwords South Africans are using within the users in South Africa are using within the organization. So I took seven South African-based organizations, some private, and I think two of them were governments, and I collected password hashes from them. So it's extremely tough to actually ask to get them to agree to give me their NTS databases that contains it. And I told them like I'm just using it just to see what kinds of passwords, and I'll share the results with them at the end of the discussion. So basically, I collected 2,614 LM hashes and 170,000 NTLM hashes out of this. And then I get cracking on these passwords. And what I found was that in the LM hashes, most of the passwords that people were using within the organizations was ABC. ABC123 was actually the top password in South Africa for LM hashes. And then followed by password and Fish Eagle. I don't know why Fish Eagle, but hey, that was the third top password that was used when LM hashes. In NTLM hashes in South Africa, a lot of passwords were password 1. Password 1 followed by capital letters of all password. And then another very popular one was people using their company name as a coping mechanism. So basically, this is the breakdown of all the passwords that people are using. So you can see the ABC, Fish Eagle, ABC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 password were heavily used in South Africa. And one thing you'll notice is that most of these passwords are all basically English passwords. There's not one that comes off as an African word at all. Other interesting information was that users also created passwords that followed around their products, the company products. So if the company sold cars, they'll call it company car 123 or whatever. And some users also use their cities and their towns that they were in. So if I'm a pen tester and I'm coming to organizations, the first thing I normally try is I'm going to use a company name, I'm going to use the region, I'm going to use the town to try guess users' password. And chances are I'm going to get one or two hits. Then one department that I did some work on, they created a lot of their passwords according to what the service account is going to be used for. For example, SQL-30 was obviously for SQL, that was their default SQL password. And South Africa is very religious, so a lot of people were using Bible verses. So you could literally take, for example, Revelations, and people will actually will use that as a password. And people also use, as I said, months as coping mechanisms, and they also did a lot of keyboard walking when they were doing their passwords as well, because of the default password policy, and the organization setting it to only 10 in a year, so people could not reuse passwords. So people started doing weird things, use keyboard walking. When you looked at the password length as well, I found that people also still follow most of the passwords are cracked were 8 characters long, followed by 9, 10, which was it's still following, which was basically I kind of knew that this was about what I was going to be getting from a lot of the users, considering that the user awareness is kind of low in South Africa. And then the last one was basically the character sets of the users. So a lot of South African users, they don't want to add special characters in, even though they're second. But most of the top passwords that people used was letters, numbers. That's it. Because of the user awareness training, people not telling them add a special character at least to add a bit of mixture in. Then, so this got me thinking around if we took the weak passwords, top English weak passwords, and you made them into an African language, what kind of things can we get? And this whole story came about when I was in Zimbabwe. I was doing a project in Zimbabwe, and I captured some password hashes in the organization, and I started to say, okay, let me start cracking them. And my default and my word list were just not working. The default word list were just not working. Until I started playing around with the people's usernames, and I started making the usernames as their passwords, and I started getting hits. One example is the Chamunaro. That's his full name. He uses his first name as his password, and for some strange reason, in all my word lists, I did not have that word to play around with. So this got me thinking. Okay, like maybe there's something around this that I could start doing. Oops. Okay. So in South Africa, languages are very regional based in South Africa. As you can see, so the blue is mostly, that's like Afrikaans speaking. Afrikaans is like a subset of Dutch. So that's mostly spoken in the Cape area. The Eastern Cape is very Xhosa based, and then the sort of like, I think that's like the yellow or so green, so I'm a bit colorblind. That is Zulu. So I'm Zulu. So that's where most of them are spoken. And then in the middle, where Lesotho and the Free States, that's mostly Southern Sotho. And then if you go right to the top, the topmost part, the green part there, there's Venda. Venda, you'll see, is very, very interesting a bit later. But so South Africa is very regionally based around languages. So in South Africa, we have 11 official languages. But for the purpose of the study, I only concentrate on 8 of them. So I excluded Afrikaans because Afrikaans has got a Dutch, it's based on Dutch. Even though Afrikaners in South Africa, they will say, no, we are totally African, but I don't want to get into that sort of halfway fight with him. So I just excluded it completely. So I concentrated on English, Zulu, Setswana, Sepedi, Venda, Ndebele, Setswana, Tsonga, and Xhosa. So those are the languages. And one of the things that I didn't add in here is that in South Africa, a lot of our languages can be grouped together. For example, if you speak Zulu, you could speak to Setswana, Ndebele, Xhosa, and there's another, and in Zimbabwe as well. You could speak from Zimbabwe, and basically if you follow this map, in South Africa, if you can imagine just Zimbabwe, just above this, you can speak from Zimbabwe. If you speak Zulu, you can speak from Zimbabwe all the way down to the Cape, because of how the languages are grouped up. All languages are grouped up. So, example, Northern Sotho and Southern Sotho could speak together as well, and then Swati could also speak to Zulu, and then Venda is just on its own. Nobody understands Venda. Yeah, even South Africans find Venda hard to speak. So basically, the experiment was to collect known weak passwords and then convert them to the various African languages, and then see how many of these passwords people could actually crack. The whole test is not about me, it's about what other researchers can do with these passwords if I created a password in the African language. So basically, I randomly selected 19 passwords from Semantics Top 500. I just randomly chose that. These are some of the words that I picked. Some of the words that I looked at. But obviously, some of them I can't really convert them into an African word because we don't have, for example, NASCAR. We don't do NASCAR, so there's no such thing for us. So yes. So, and then one very important thing was I removed the special characters from the Chivenda language. Venda has got different special characters, which means that it's got its own different way of a keyboard. You actually have to download something that reprograms your keyboard to actually have some of these special characters, apparently. So I had to remove these because I'm not testing if a person can find also the special characters in this. Then after that, I dropped all the words to lowercase, so I could start doing some fancy things with them later. And then after that, another very important thing about South African languages is that in English we normally capitalize the first letter, but in Zulu, for example, my language, we capitalize the third letter. So we say isiZulu. So there's the Zulu part is the capitalized part. And then also, but at the same time, we also can capitalize the second letter. So we very sort of different to how English-based language is done. And then the reason for this, the reason that I also lowercase everything is because I wasn't testing whether the person if people can can figure out that the third character, for example, is the one that is capitalized and not the first. Because I wanted to follow the normal, how people just make a password of how they've been told in the organization. And then the special characters that I used are from the organizations that I picked at the beginning. I took all the special characters that the users used, and then I put them all together. And then I created a Python script to say that randomly pick. These are the special characters you could randomly pick. So all the special characters are from actual people used, the special characters that people used. And then what I did after that was I've got my passwords created. And then I hashed them in NTLM because I wanted to mimic an organization. And then I also did MD5. Why? I just don't know why. I just picked MD5. So yeah. So these are the words that I picked. So the yellow are the English words that I selected. And then these are all the languages that I select, the 8 languages. And then I converted the English word into the various languages. You'll see that, for example, let's look at password. In Zulu and Xhosa, the word is exactly the same. So that's why I said to you, in South Africa, our languages are very much grouped together. There are some languages that I just couldn't not find the words. For example, Chivenda. As much as I try to find those words, it's exceptionally hard to find them because where I was in South Africa, there's quite a few Venda people, but the problem is that most South Africa, we speak so much English, and some of our languages, when I speak Zulu, for example, we even start to incorporate a lot of English words into our languages. So some people it's kind of like, when I ask them, like, hey, what's the word for come in? They're like, I don't know. So it's kind of tough to get some of the words. So basically I was just like, it doesn't matter. I've got most of the words that I wanted to play around with. And then if you look at let me in the Xhosa side, so the second one, the bottom there, you'll see that it's got 2 words. Sometimes in African languages, for example, let me in can mean 2 things. It can mean gifage. Gifage means put me in. Phakathi means come in. But we use those words sort of interchangeably depending on the sentence and depending on who you're talking and how you're talking to and who you're talking to as well. So I just said, let me just add both of them in, I'll test both of them. And then what else I did was that I took the months because, as you know, users like using some people's coping mechanism when creating passwords was to use the months and convert them into the various languages. Sorry, and use the months of January 18 as a password. So I said, okay, let me also test months to see how effective they could be as well. So basically, I used the months that I used are the traditional words for each month. Or sometimes in Zulu, for example, we can say July or July, which is still very much English based, but it's not the real, not the real way of saying it. So basically, I said, okay, let me test the traditional way. So I converted each month into the languages. And then this is just an example of some of the passwords that I created. Um, so, so I capitalized the first letter, as you can see that the hashcat mask, capitalized the first letter, added random number and then added in a special character. And for the months, I capitalized the month, and then added 18 at the end to represent this is 2018. So yeah, and this is just a breakdown of so I created 330 of these passwords. And this is just a breakdown of all the words, of all the passwords that I generated. So 11 characters, 10, and drop down the list up to just 122 character course. I also wanted to gauge it from easy, sort of like to exceptionally hard for the words. Then once that was done, I've created my hash, I've hashed my passwords, and I uploaded them to various password cracking websites. So I uploaded them to Hashcat, hashes.org, and Online Hashcrack, just to see what kind of password or if people can crack these passwords. What I found was that I uploaded them on the 30th of July, and then I checked again on the 30th of August, so a linear month later, and I found that only 48% of them, or 159 of these passwords, were actually cracked. 100 of them were for NTLM hashes, and 55 of them were MD5. Hashkiller cracked like about 90 of the 100 NTLM hashes, and then also most of the MD5, which was I was pretty happy with the results. But when I started looking at the stats, I found that most people actually cracked 8 characters. There was only three of them at 14 characters that were actually cracked. And the next slide actually puts them together. So the generated ones, so this is how I generated them. These are the ones that got cracked. So you'll see that out of the 11 character passwords are successfully cracked. 8 characters, which also kind of conforms that whole thing about people actually using, for example, if a password passes 8 characters, I sort of stop looking at the password because I just don't have time. So it could also mean that for the same thing for the user. What was amazing was that people actually still had somebody had a 14 character passwords, 14 character of the base words. Another very important thing I didn't add in here is that all the 7 character passwords were actually cracked. So yeah, so a person could have run a really nice brute force on all those passwords to get them at the end. Then this is just a breakdown of the base words. So I wanted to find out what base words people actually found. So the ones highlighted in green are the ones that were actually compromised by the people. So you'll find that, for example, Bible in Zulu was not cracked. Bible in Zulu and Swati, and Xhosa was not cracked at all. And then the one in blue in Xhosa, let me in, the Phakathi was the only one that's cracked, and Gifage wasn't cracked at all. Then the whites are ones that people just could not crack them, the base words in the different various ways. And then the months was also sort of interesting as well. People were able to crack quite a few months, but then, for example, in Xhosa, they could not crack them at all. Only 2 of them were cracked. So if South African users used the Xhosa language as their months, as their passwords, maybe they're a bit more protected. So that was sort of interesting as well. So basically, put it all together was that a lot of the word password was successfully cracked in the 2 languages. So using the word password is actually not good at all. The word hello was was only fully cracked. Was the only word that was fully cracked. In if you look at it, hello was the only English word that was fully cracked in each of the languages. Maybe because it's spoken quite a lot it's quite a lot in the different languages. For example, I'm Zulu, so we say Sawubona. It's the first thing that we say. Even white people in my country understand. We say Sawubona to them. They actually understand what we're saying. Um, and then isiZulu language does not actually sort of offer, was the most cracked language. The reason for isiZulu being the most cracked language is because it's, Zulu people are known to be very dominating people. In South Africa, they actually call us the warrior nation. So Zulus and Afrikaners, they kind of say like we part of the same WhatsApp group in South African terms, because we think we're the best. So therefore, when we speak to anybody else, we expect them to understand Zulu. So just how it is. So if you come to South Africa and you speak Afrikaans, for example, in KZN, the person will respond to you back in Zulu, and then you can have this kind of standoff, between the two people, which is kind of funny at times. But then it mostly happens if you're a black person. So if you're a black person and I come and I speak, for example, Sotho to a Zulu person will respond back to me in Zulu, and they'll just expect you to understand, go on the merry way. So Zulu is spoken, Zulu is understood in many of the regions. So it kind of also understand so it's going to be appearing I've also kind of presume that it's going to appear a lot of times on password lists as well. The closer language was as I said, was the least cracked when it came to months, and Setswana was the language that was Setswana was the language that was cracked most in the months. If you reuse months as passwords, I really don't know why. I'm still have to go look as to why Setswana was the most, considering that it's very localized to only Johannesburg. So in conclusion, corporate South Africa, even though there are 11 official languages, we're still using English words as our passwords, which really think we should be moving away from that and start training the users to start thinking, saying like, instead of using English, why don't you use your home language, just to make it a bit difficult for a person to try to crack. And then also password also was the most popular was the most popular password in South Africa, also very sadly. But then this converts back to the user awareness training that people use. Normally times in South Africa, I've been in engagements where I'm sitting down, I'm doing a pen test, and I say to the guys, what's the domain admin password? And somebody will shout it out for me, And it's normally company name 123. So it's still very sad that you can still get away with stuff like that. So basically, if you convert the English words into, for example, the Zulu language, it did not really offer any sort of protection, any additional security features for the user. So, but then it's always better. So on my side, I've started looking at, for example, using vendor. Even though I don't speak vendor, I started using vendor words as my passwords, and stuff like that, because it just makes it a bit harder for the person, because they'll say, okay, this person is Zulu, for example. Let's say somebody's like me, is trying to guess what kind of password you are. They say, okay, I know this person's going to use an African language. He's Zulu, so Sean's going to use a Zulu word. Good luck. So yes, so that's basically me. Thank you.